Welcome to the Influencing Virtually Masterclass. I'm Colleen Haug, and I'm so excited that you're here. So it's the week of March 16th, 2020, and my husband Matt is sitting at our dining room table with his laptop, papers everywhere. Now, he's the branch manager of two real estate offices, so typically on a weekday morning, he would be there. But like everyone else, he's been shoved out of his offices and forced to work from home. I happened to walk by as he's on their first ever manager's Zoom call. I glance at his screen and then quickly do a double take. What is happening? Now I'm glued to his screen. Of course, I stand off to the side out of range of his camera, but I see some crazy stuff as I start to focus in on each individual manager's little video box. So many things are happening that would have never taken place if this meeting were done in person. And I just keep thinking to myself, how is business even getting done? How influential can these leaders be with their team or fellow managers be with their peers when there are so many unprofessional and distracting things going on? But hey, I totally get it. I was there. On November 27th of 2017, it was my first official day working from home. I transitioned from my 15-year corporate career to a full-time consultant, speaker, and trainer. And about a month in, after working from the dining room table, I kind of pieced together what I could do to create a home office, if you will, in the corner of my bedroom. And then I'm getting ready for my first virtual call. Now, my desk sat right in front of my bedroom window. So you would have had a straight shot behind me of about half of my bedroom into my bathroom. Now, at the time, I didn't know all of the virtual call etiquette, but I was pretty certain that looking into my bathroom was not appropriate. Besides, I really didn't want anybody zooming in and focusing on whether or not my bathroom was clean. So I quickly grabbed the backdrop that I had been using to shoot videos, and I propped it up right behind the little chair. I mean, like little chair, a white plastic folding chair from IKEA. So I've got this backdrop where one end is reaching the wall right next to me, and the other end is reaching my bed, which is pretty much next to me. So I'm essentially sitting within this tiny box. And I couldn't push the backdrop farther away from me because the rod at the top would then hit the ceiling fan and it would come crashing down, trapping me underneath it. Now, I will let you figure out how I learned that that was even possible. I didn't even have a good camera. I didn't have good microphone, nothing. I mean, I had the earbuds from my iPhone. But I got started. So, of course, as the call begins, I hear this awful crashing sound right outside my window. Yep, totally forgot. It's Wednesday, trash day. So the garbage truck is literally picking up, tipping over, and slamming my 3 trash cans one by one. We all have to start somewhere, right? The call went okay, but I know it could have had a substantially better outcome if I had the right strategies in place. So I had to step up my game. But really, I wish months earlier that somebody would have grabbed me through the monitor, shook me, and asked me what is happening. So when 2.5 years later, I'm mouth wide open, staring at Matt's laptop screen, I couldn't help but begin to share my experience and all of my lessons. So I imagine That's why you're here today. You've been forced from your office to your home and shoved face first, literally face first, into virtual meetings. I mean, Zoom's usage soared from 10 million daily meeting participants to 300. Microsoft saw a 70% increase in 1 month, and Google Meets is adding roughly 3 million users every day. And so you're likely one of these millions. You may be finding yourself just like my husband Matt and many of my clients, that there remains this tremendous gap in the ability to influence and impact in this virtual world. And you have to be able to do this. And you have to be able to do it successfully in this economy, especially if your organization or your business is still in survival mode, or you're a leader trying to hold on to that top talent or drive results when everyone is worried about change. Or if you're in sales, it's imperative right now you are delivering that revenue. So today, I'm going to teach you the 3 critical strategies to successfully pivot from in-person to on-camera. And I offer that you will want to stick around till the end, because that is when I'm going to give you the 5 effective ideas that you can begin doing right now. Like, I'm going to dig in to the nitty-gritty, so you're going to want to be there for that. All right, let's get started. So critical strategy number 1 is connect. You must be able to immediately create real connection if you want to influence others. So that's nothing new, but let's think about how you would typically do that when walking into an in-person meeting with anyone you hope to influence, whether that's a potential new client, a direct report, or a senior level executive at your own company. What do? You give a big smile, maybe offer a firm handshake if you're meeting the person for the first time, maybe a fist bump. Of course, in the future, we'll be doing air high fives from 6 feet away, right? And then what are the first words out of your mouth? Typically, it's, "Hi, how are you?" And what do you look for or notice? Because when you're in an in-person meeting, you've got a 360-degree landscape view of what's around you. So if you're sitting in a client's lobby, you might notice some of their products on display or awards. If you're in someone else's office, you might see a family photo or some, memorabilia. And if you're walking into an internal meeting, you might notice, hey, you're wearing a new iWatch. When you're in person, all of your senses are stimulated. Those in-person meetings activate a kind of chemistry and energy created by being simply in near proximity to one another. You're nearly physically connected, right? And then in those in-person meetings, how much time do you spend together? When you're in person, the time isn't necessarily limited or confined to just that scheduled meeting. You can connect outside of that. There's that maybe coffee chat right before the meeting, or the walk back down the hall to your desk, or maybe a lunch afterwards. Those are the times where it's your chance to have this personal conversation and show you're a real person, that you're not just a boss, a peer, or a salesperson. It's where you get to share your work experience. And that's when you can expose others to your thinking, your style, and your product. And typically, the more time you spend with someone, the more they tend to like you. And I'm going to guess that's true for you, that if I were to spend more time with you, I would like you that much more. All of these things create immediate connection. So it's more possible in person. There's that kind of sense of warmth, helping the other person decide whether or not you're friendly or possibly honest. someone they'd like to do business with or who they'd like to support on their mission. But what is truly at the foundation of connection? What has to be there for real connection to be made? Can you think of a word? Put a word inside of your head. What is it? Trust. When you're meeting someone new, say a new manager or a new team member or a potential new client, the very first question this person is asking themselves about you, and this has been proven, the very first question they ask is, can I trust this person? And research has shown that trust is an essential asset to break down the silos, encourage collaboration, drive engagement, and manage that never-ending process of change, which is never-ending right now for sure. So when trust is present, people can align around a common purpose, and they are open to taking risks. This is so important because if you want to influence how someone thinks and what action they take, you've got to be able to guide them out of their comfort zone and into where you want to take them, someplace they may deem as risky. But when there's no connection, no trust, there is no reason for that person to even listen to you. So what's the result? No influence, no impact. So the first step in getting them to go there with you is to start building trust. Look, if you skip that, if you skip the trust, if you skip building that connection and you focus straight going into giving advice or persuading them or showing them your capabilities, your intelligence, your product knowledge, if you've done that without considering how much trust you've built, I am telling you, your efforts will crash and burn. So you've got to have this mindset about connection and trust, not just as a buzzword. It really is the key to that connection, from leaders to their teams, from employees to their peers, from salespeople to their clients. And look, the stakes are always high. But right now, in times of uncertainty, in times when trust is at an all-time low, at times when you or your organization may still be in survival mode, the stakes are even higher. But in a virtual world, your ability to connect and build trust in the same way as in person is not possible. Like, you can't shake their hand. You can't create that energy based on proximity. You can't take in a 360-degree view of their environment. And there's no additional coffee chat, hallway walk, or lunch conversation. In a virtual world, you are limited to a 15 by maybe 25-inch screen using your earbuds while possibly sitting at your own dining room table, watching the clock before the next virtual meeting begins. Your senses are limited to just sight and sound, and your energy is confined into a very small space. Yet nothing is going to happen if that connection isn't there. Not sales, partnerships, team members getting on board for a project. So how do you make an immediate connection in a virtual world so they can begin to trust you? I've learned one method through my mentor and trainer, Bo Eason, that I have seen time and time again to be the absolute best way to immediately create real connection and establish trust. And that's through your personal story. You saw that for your own eyes today at the very beginning of this masterclass when I opened with a story. And I talked about my husband, Matt, and I shared earlier that he's a branch manager in real estate. Now, when he took over one of his offices from a previous manager, the majority of the agents had been completely demoralized and angry. So when Matt was stepping in, trust was rock bottom. He knew he had to make an immediate connection. So he had his chance. His sales meeting was quickly approaching. He'd first be introduced by his VP, and then Matt would briefly, address the office. The first words would be coming out of his mouth. The first words with these no trust agents. So as he prepared for the meeting, he decided the one thing he wanted out of the meeting was for his agents to know about one of his personal traits that he valued the most, and he also received the most sincere feedback from other people. And that trait was that he would be there for anyone at any time. So he could have opened with the typical, "Hey everyone, I'm Matt, your new branch manager, and I'm so excited to be here. With my previous management, entrepreneur, and real estate experience, I'm here to lead the office to success. And I want you to know that you can trust me, because my greatest trait is that I will be here for anyone at any time." Blah, 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 just words. And even maybe words that the previous manager said, and look what happened. This does nothing to connect or establish trust. Instead, Matt opened with a story. He shared the story of how he became a dad when he was 19 years old. A story that has nothing to do with real estate or management, and the one that isn't necessarily showcasing the best time in his life. But as the story unfolds, without him saying it, without him saying the actual words, it is clear that he will be there for anyone at any time. The result? Immediately at the end of the meeting, countless agents approach him, beyond excited that he's there. And more importantly, they shared their connection to the story. Connection. Once they connected to him, heard who he really was through his story, that trust-based relationship began. And from there, he's been able to influence. They listen to his advice, they're motivated to work harder, and they're willing to try something risky that they would have never done before. All right. So now let's transition to critical step number 2, which is competence. So simply put, competence means that you have the ability to do something well. It's totally different than how smart you are, what your intelligence level is, because competence is super straightforward. It's transparent. You can see competence happening right before your eyes. And while competence all by itself alone won't make you a great influencer, right? We've already talked about you need connection, trust. It won't make you a great influencer, but it can certainly undo you. Because the second question, right after someone asks if they can trust you, the very next question is, can I respect this person? In other words, do they believe you are competent? Socrates believed that the one who clearly knows best what ought to be done will most easily gain the obedience of the others. Translation: if you know what you're doing, they'll follow you. It's just why we hire a CPA to file our taxes or go to the doctor when we have symptoms. We want that competence. We want to have somebody guiding us who knows what they're doing. Now, with competence, there's actually 2 aspects. So first is being competent in your subject matter, your content, whatever your area of expertise is. And the second is in your presentation, how you present that content, that subject matter, whether that's through a PowerPoint and or speaking, but your presentation. So think about a time when you saw someone presenting in person. If they fumbled to get their presentation set up, they didn't have the handouts prepared, and they didn't have at least a baseline level of the subject knowledge, they couldn't answer any questions, and they weren't making good eye contact. Seriously, how much did you respect them? How much did you believe in them? And did you really want to support them or do business with them? And let me just clarify, being competent doesn't mean you know how to do everything. It just means you know where the resources are to get the thing done. So when it comes to your subject matter, I gotta believe you've got that down. Like, you know your product, you know your project, you know your mission. That, you know who you can turn to. I'm not going to spend any time on that. In today's masterclass, I'm focused on your competence in your presentation in a virtual world on camera, which is where you probably want to up your game. And this is absolutely a skill you can develop. You do not need to be an actor. Like, get rid of that thought that you've got to be an actor or that you have to have natural talent. It's an excuse. Don't let that hold you back, because that natural talent, for some people who maybe have it, it will only get them so far. I share that with my daughter, Reese. She's 11. And we have this reality competition show that we enjoy watching. It's a dance competition. And after each couple does their routine, the panel of 4 judges provides feedback. And Reese knows I absolutely cringe when this one judge at the end of each performance always raises and says, "Oh my goodness, you've got such natural talent." And I recognize that each of us do have some natural skills and talents, but it's like discrediting all of the sweat and tears, rehearsal, and hard work that went on behind the scenes for that performer. And I share with Reese, just like I'm going to share with you, that even if you're up against somebody, even if you were to compare yourself on camera presenting versus somebody else who maybe has a little bit more natural talent, if that person just relies on that natural talent and you behind the scenes are rehearsing and working and upping your game, increasing your skill level, eventually you will surpass, or at least increase the odds that you will surpass, that person who is relying on natural talent alone. So if you want to demonstrate your competence as a virtual presenter, you can, but it's going to take that effort. We can't just rely on the skills we've had. We've got to get better. So you showing up today demonstrates that you're willing to put in that effort. And just think about how long maybe you've been doing presentations. Again, whether that's just PowerPoint or speaking, whatever that looks like, but think about how long you've been doing it to prepare for in-person and what that preparation looks like. You know, you've got to do your research. You've got to maybe leverage another team to gather information. You put together your presentation, maybe do some run-throughs of it. And then you go set up in the conference room and you know how to set up all the tech, or at least you know the extension to IT for that person to come in and do it for you. And maybe when you're in that presentation, you have a trusted colleague, somebody who's there with you. So just in case an issue comes up or a question gets asked, you two can have that kind of non-verbal exchange, right? Like the eye look, or, you know, it's like the unspoken word to be able to know who's going to handle this. Well, you can't do all of this in a virtual meeting. So pivoting from these in-person meetings to on camera presents a different dynamic in how you will showcase your competence. First note, things do not have to be perfect. We are dealing with technology. In the middle of your presentation, your screen might freeze. Your PowerPoint may go into, presenter mode where it's the slide and your notes. I literally saw that just recently on someone's live presentation. Or your headset could stop working. That happened to me as I was preparing this week for this masterclass. My earbuds of a couple of years all of a sudden completely broke. So that could have happened to me in the middle of a presentation. So Right now, people are more kind of tolerant of these things because, as you hear over and over again, we're all in this together. Everyone is experiencing what it's like to have their dog bark in the background, their kids pop their heads into the camera, or God forbid, the internet completely goes down because the entire family is on a Zoom call at the exact same time. But for these things to be kind of dismissed by your viewers or by your team, by your audience, you have to have first built that connection, right? First critical strategy. And then as long as you've been demonstrating your competence along the way, they'll be more lenient. But we ideally want to get to a place where the presentation is near fault proof, right? So how do we do that? I'm not going to tell you anything new. It's preparation and rehearsal. And look, I'm not saying you didn't prepare when you had in-person presentations, but your preparation for virtual has to be way more than usual. Double or triple perhaps, depending on the level of importance for that particular meeting. Make sure that your content is a little bit probably shorter and more simplified. So don't try to straight take what you would have been doing over and over again in person and just flip it into virtual. It does not work. You're going to have to streamline that and potentially shorten it. I also highly recommend that you're role playing. And again, I would tell you that for in-person, but even more important for virtual. And I know most people don't like to do role playing. It's kind of scary and awkward, but it works. There's a reason why it's Sales 101. Do your role playing. And then rehearse. Rehearse and rehearse and rehearse. Ideally, you're doing a run through with someone virtually. I mean, even in preparation for this master class, I had both my husband and my son, Ethan, dial in from their Zoom accounts just so I could test the technology and do a run through with them. And then make sure you've got everything set up ahead of time. When you're a participant, you don't need to jump onto a virtual call more than a couple of minutes in advance. But when you're the presenter, you've got to be logged on way farther. So just as an example, for the masterclass, I was set up 30 minutes prior. Now my video was off, I had mute on, there was no audio, but I needed to do that just to make sure that everything I needed was set up properly. In just a moment, I'm going to cover some of these tactical elements when it comes to how to set up properly. So make sure you stay with me in that next critical strategy. So strategy number 1, connect. Strategy number 2, competence. So before we move on, I had a question from the chat. So Ashley on my team posted this or texted me. So I just want to go over here. The question is there material that outlines these tips that you can share? Great question. Absolutely. I will be sending out a recap of these top tips so that you're able to use it as a quick reference or share it internally if that works for you. So happy to do that, happy to provide that outline for you. So thank you so much for that question. All right. Let's move into critical strategy number 3. Now get ready because we're going to dive into the nitty gritty. I mean, very tactical, but stay with me through all of them. Plus, after that, I'm going to be taking some more questions. So stay with me. And I've got a couple of good ones that have already been coming in. So critical strategy number 3 is captivate. When you want to influence and impact, you have got to be able to captivate your audience. Again, this is not different than in person, but it's so much harder in the virtual world. If you've ever presented on a stage, whether you're a speaker or you were invited to be an expert at a conference or a seminar, when you've got that stage, when you even have a conference room or sitting across the table from somebody at a lunch in a restaurant, You've got some space. You've got a place to be able to express yourself and really captivate them. In a virtual world, you're limited to being a talking head inside of a box. You're limited to some hand and arm gestures. So you've got to be able to captivate your audience with these limitations in mind, because on the other side of the screen is a whole world of distractions. The struggle is real. It's already real, again, when you're trying to keep your audience's attention when you're in a conference room together, but it's even harder in the virtual world. In fact, a research study found that people's ability to pay attention during a face-to-face meeting was 94%. That's super high, higher than I expected. While in a virtual meeting, it dropped to 42%. There are so many distractions. So I have for you the 5 effective ideas that you can begin doing right now. In fact, you might start doing them while we're on this call. That's how effective and simple they are. But these are the effective strategies that are going to break down the barriers, eliminate the distractions, at least eliminate the distractions you can control, right? You can't jump on the other side into the other person's home and just, control for their distractions. So it's what you can do so that you can captivate your audience. All right, if you're ready, let's dive in. Getting tactical here. So the first effective strategy is camera positioning. Oh, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. I believe it is the one that will make it or break it in order for you to be effectively communicating and captivating on your virtual calls. You must have your camera positioned at eye level or slightly above. The absolute worst is to have your camera positioned underneath you. And on a recent call with a client, I had a question about that. They were kind of joking like, oh, that's so you don't have a double chin. No, it has nothing to do with double chin. It's because if your camera is underneath you, that means your audience is looking up your nose. And we don't want them looking up your nose. We want them to be looking at your eyes, the rest of your face. So ideally, you have a separate camera, but I realize that's not always possible. And your camera on your laptop may just be positioned kind of weird, or your desk is low. So, your laptop may be a little harder to work with. So old school, grab a stack of books. We don't have to be so fancy here. Grab a stack of books and prop that laptop up to get that camera in a good position. Or if you have maybe a different height table or counter, something like that, just to be able to maneuver it a little bit. Another idea is to use your phone or your tablet as your camera. So most of the virtual platforms have an app. So if you download that to your device, then you can log into your virtual call and use that as your camera. And the reason why I even offer that is because it's a little easier to manipulate. You can move it around, you can prop it up against things. In fact, my daughter Reese, who I talked about, she uses her tablet for all of her Zoom calls, because when it's for schoolwork, she can have it on her, tablet stand on her desk, positioned nicely. But then when it's time for her dance or tumbling classes, she can take it easily downstairs, prop it up on some books, and make it expand so that the whole living room, that her instructor can see you. So it's just a nice way if you need an option of having a separate camera. Your camera placement, as I mentioned, helps with that eye contact. We want them looking in your eyes. And if they're looking in your eyes, we want them to feel you are looking in their eyes. So 99% of the time, you need to be looking straight into the camera lens. I know it's sometimes fun to be looking around at the other faces and kind of see who's there. But if you're the presenter, you have to be focused here because, again, think about in person, right? When you're in person, you can do that eye contact. And as a presenter, you're also maybe feeding off of their energy, or you're getting some nonverbal cues like agreement or confusion. But you're not going to get that on these virtual calls. The boxes, if you're meeting with one more than one person, right? The boxes are so small. So you're really not going to get anything from looking at them. So have your eye contact straight into the camera lens 99% of the time. And by doing that, it allows the person on the other end to feel like you're speaking directly at them. That connection is going to be so much greater, and then you're captivating them. All right, critical strategy, or excuse me, effective tip number 2 is background. If you only remember one thing about background, just don't have things moving. Movement is so distracting. And again, one of my pet peeves is the darn ceiling fans. Look, I love to have my ceiling fan on, but if it's showing behind me, it has got to be off. If you want your ceiling fan on, then move where you're situated. Nothing movement. It is so distracting. We want them focused on you, the presenter. Also with your background, just do a quick double check, make sure it's clean. I've had horror stories about, dirty gym socks, like lying on the floor in the background. Oh my goodness, right? Again, it's not that we're trying to be perfect, but if you want to influence and impact, you have to think about these things. Now, personal touches in the background are completely fine. You notice I've got my books, and even when my husband Matt used this space for one of his managers' calls, he put a Voltron, if you remember, it's like a transformer looking collector's item. So a personal touch, just like you would do maybe in your own office or your own desk if it was in person. You've got a couple of things. But the difference is that when you're in someone's office and you see those couple of things, you still have a big wide view. So they're not as distracting. But here in the virtual world, when we're right here, you see everything. So you want just a few things so that they're not distracting. So again, they are focused on you connecting. And then I added this in because recently when I was giving a similar talk with another client, the ask was about virtual backgrounds. My professional advice to you is use virtual backgrounds as a last ditch effort. Again, they're distracting. But I mean, seriously, if the kids are going crazy, the dog is barking, and the only way you can escape is by climbing into your closet right next to your laundry basket, then put the virtual background on. But do something that's pretty mellow. I sat in on a meeting, and the woman, which I get it, she was trying to be funny. She had a photo of stacks of rolls of toilet paper. And this was pretty quickly, as we started to shelter in place and toilet paper was nowhere to be found. So it was humorous for a moment, but not super professional if she was the one presenting. And I got kind of tired of staring at rolls of toilet paper, right? So, again, creative, personal, but keep it simple. All right, next we are moving on to number 3, which is lighting. So of course, I do this professionally. I've been doing this for over 2 years. So I'm set up in more of a studio feel. I have professional lighting, but I realize that not everybody's going to have that as well. So assuming that most of your presentations are during the day, the best thing to do is go position yourself so you're facing a window where the natural light is. Honestly, natural light is the best light, even better than any of the ring or bar lights that you can purchase. And then kind of the reverse is true. Try not to have any light, if so, very little light. So you never want to sit with a window behind you. or at least if it's behind you, close the shutters, get the light away. Because what happens if you have just a little bit of light in front of you and a lot of light behind you, for the viewer, it just creates this blob. It's like a black silhouette. They can't see your face. And again, we're trying to captivate and connect. So lighting is definitely important. So natural light if possible. Okay, number 4, sound. First, let's talk about your voice. I shared with you that being virtual, like you've got to give more, right? It takes more. And absolutely your voice is that way. I mean, think about when you've seen a big keynote presenter in a big conference, right? Like everything about what they're doing, including their voice, is just, it's intensified, right? And so you want to make sure that your voice is louder, that you're watching pitch, that you're changing your tone. So again, you want to captivate. So make sure that you're using that voice really strongly. Got to amp it up. The best way to capture your voice, if you're not investing in an expensive microphone, is seriously a $10 pair of earbuds work great because the microphone is right here. So it helps capture your voice and eliminate some of that background noise, which takes me to the second part of sound, which is the noise. Look, I know it's kind of the fun part. We've got family at home, but then the hard part is that there's pets and children everywhere, right? So as best as you can, try to control for those things. Like my family has been on high alert all week. They knew that I would be running this master class. Like this is an important meeting for me. And so they knew, hey, don't come near the home office. Everybody's kind of on high alert. So obviously I'm not asking that every single meeting, but when you've got something where really you need to be doing that influence, try to minimize and control for that background noise. Distractions, just stay with that. All right, number 5, your final effective strategy, presence. How are you showing up? We're on Zoom exhaustion for a lot of people. There's articles written about it. I've heard from my community, from my clients, and I realize some leaders are kind of like on Zoom creation overload. Like whatever happened to just old school telephone conference calls, right? Everybody's feeling this need to connect because we can't do it in person. And so I applaud that. But you as the leader, then that means if you're going to be there on a virtual call, if you're the presenter on this virtual call, you've got to show up in the right way. You can't be exhausted from it. You've got to make sure that you are centered and grounded, that you're focused and there for them. You've got to show up like, what kind of clothing are you wearing? So it's fine if you're going to have a casual meeting and people want to show up in their athleisure wear, great. But again, if you are there to influence and impact, you better be wearing something that's at least semi-professional, that presents you as your best self. Make sure you are focused, that you're not getting distracted during your presentation. And what's your energy level? I've been saying it takes so much to be here presenting on these Zoom calls. So what is your energy level? What are you bringing to it? Because when you're on camera, you are just such a focus. Like there's almost no room for error. Even in comparison to an in-person meeting, when you might have been standing at the front of that conference room, there's still opportunity for people to kind of look around. It's not a little box zoomed in on your face. On virtual, it's here. So you've got to be present. You've got to be there ready to go. So I could go on and on. There are so many tips and strategies that I can share with you, but the 5 I gave you, they are things you could be doing. And like I said, you might have already started doing them while we were on the call today, like adjusting your camera angle. But these are the ones that you can implement right now. So just to recap, we've got connection. You've got to make sure that you're connected and they feel they can trust you. your competence, both in your subject matter and in presenting it. And then make sure you're captivating. Help eliminate those distractions and really captivate your audience. So I'm going to come back to a couple questions in just a moment, but let me ask you, would it be helpful to you if you could do what I do in front of the camera with this kind of connection, competence, and captivation? Because here's the deal. You've got to be able to do this. You've got to be able to pivot from in-person to on camera, because we don't know when or if we will ever go back to the same world. You may find yourself, even if you go back to the office, you may find yourself behind a camera more than you ever expected. In fact, I'm going to bet on that. And all of this makes you an even better presenter, even in person. So you will jump out of this pandemic stronger in your skills than everyone else who just kind of waited for everything to be over and go back to normal. Think about your team, your career, your organization. How could this change your sales, your leadership, your opportunity for promotion? So I have a special assessment for you. It's called the Influencing Virtually Gap Assessment. So this is an evaluation of the key elements that are missing from your team or your organization from being able to pivot on camera in order to influence virtually. So this could be for your sales team and a department, or maybe your senior leaders. Now, I'm only offering this to leaders and organizations who are committed. I don't work with organizations that are trying to take shortcuts. I only work with those who want to make a true impact. I make one promise to you, that if you do what I say and do what I do, your teams and organization will never be the same. So here's what you're going to get with the Influencing Virtually Gap Assessment. First, you and me will have a kickoff call. I'm going to walk you through the process and we'll establish the outcomes. Next, I will personally conduct an audit of your virtual presentations. And then I'm going to present the findings and full assessment back to you and your company. Now, organizations pay thousands of dollars for me to consult and advise on their business. The investment for this gap assessment is free. I'm giving this to you for free. That's a seriously great deal, so I would be doing that if I were you. Take advantage. So here's what I want you to do next. I want you to go to my calendar. It's calendly.com/Colleen Houck. That's calendly.com/Colleen Houck. And I'll make sure that it's posted in the description for you. All you have to do is go to my calendar, find a time that works for you and possibly your team, and we are on. I can't wait to connect with you because we're going to work intimately to uncover the gaps so that you and your team can really influence on camera. Click on that link and set up your kickoff call now. All right, so we have a few minutes for some additional questions. Ashley on my team sent over a few, so let's look at those. All right, so Lisa, thank you for your question. It's, how do you keep yourself focused on the camera lens? It's easy to get distracted by all the other people on the screen. Oh, don't I know that, Lisa? Absolutely. Well, what you can't see is that on my screen, I can't see the Zoom browser. I have purposely hid it. I actually have my notes up in front of it. But I'm able to do that because I have a team member who's on the chat helping me. So I don't even need to be engaged in the Zoom browser. If there's a tech issue or if there's a question, a hand raised, I've got a team member who's there. So Lisa, I know you and I have even talked about that. that's a great way to be prepared, because you want to be present. You want to be able to focus into that camera lens, give all of your energy, all of your presence right there, so that they are captivated and connected with you, and they're going to follow you where you are. So hide that Zoom browser if you're the main presenter, and have somebody else who's watching everything else going on for you. All right, thanks for that question, Lisa. All right, next question is from Danny. Hey, Danny, thank you so much. It's crazy. We saw each other a couple of months before the pandemic hit. So it's crazy how the world has changed. So Danny asks, regarding competence, how important is body language inflection within, how important is body language, inflection within our voice, and firmness of our statements, so the audience believes the leader is competent, and where the audience wants to follow and elicits respect for the leader? Great. So talking about body language, voice inflection, firmness, 100%. Like, communication is key even when we're in person. The difference is that when we're in person, we can be using a lot of non-verbal communication. In the virtual world, we can't. So we have to leverage and maximize what we've got in front of us. So that is absolutely voice. It's eyes, it's inflection, it's firmness, it's energy, it's kind of hitting that exclamation mark when you need to. As far as body language, even though I'm sitting in my typical office chair, you might notice that I'm sitting forward. So I'm not leaning back here, which is what I do if I'm on more of a casual call and I'm not the main presenter. It's more conversational. But when I'm the presenter and I'm trying to get my message across, I'm leaning in. Another good strategy is to stand. So again, you'd have to prop up your laptop, your camera, but standing really helps with that body language and leveraging all of that. When I'm shooting videos, I want to be able to move even more freely than in my desk chair, but I don't want to be standing because I don't want to like go out of the frame. So I actually have a tall bar stool. So that way my feet are on the floor. I can kind of sit on the edge. I've got a little bit more movement from the waist up. So definitely the body language and your voice, all of those things are even more important virtually because you're relying on a lot less. They're just maximized. All right, one more question we've got here from Gail. Gail, thanks so much for chatting and giving us your question. Gail says, how about sitting outside? There's no space inside to be on calls with our kids in school, husband also home on calls. The workspace is in the bedroom. I get it. And she doesn't want everyone seeing that. I get that. Hence, she's been taking her virtual meetings outside in the backyard, but now everyone hears birds tweeting. Oh my goodness. Wow, struggle. I totally understand. So, hey, if that's where you need to be, go for it. I mean, I'm all for the backyard versus the bedroom. I have heard stories about people getting onto their virtual calls and their leader is like sitting or almost lying in a bed. And while they're fully dressed, that's not appropriate, right? Like, come on, guys, we got to be professional. So being outside is a great option. My husband, actually, Matt, has had to take some of his virtual calls outside. And I know spring is in the air, we're hearing birds, but I would much rather hear birds than see you lying in your bed or what's going on in your bedroom, or even hearing, a bunch of chaos behind you. So as long as it's not gardener day and the gardeners are coming right in, you should be good. So that's a great question, Gail. So I'm so excited again that you were here with me. Be sure to take advantage of the fact that I'm offering you this gap assessment for free. I'm personally going to have the call, do the audit, and then provide you with the findings and recap. I hope I've been able to provide you with some really solid and nitty-gritty in the weeds tips for you to be able to influence virtually, make that pivot from in person to on camera. Thanks so much for being here with me today. Take care.